Wow, what a great podcast topic we have today. We have something about peaches. It's something about
the dump truck.
The dump truck. It's something about cake. I just had cake this weekend, actually.
Was it for your birthday?
No, it was for graduation party. It was actually really good cake, and not this cake on the podcast. But I'm talking about real icing cake.
You ate a different cake.
Different cake, exactly.
Well, one's edible, one I don't know. But yes, today's podcast is all about how to build an ass like Kim K.
Yep, but in all seriousness, though, it means how to build bigger glutes.
Yes.
How to get those glutes working, firing, and building.
And it's important to develop strong muscular glutes. Of course, visually, whether it's a male or a female, having well-developed glutes is very attractive. But also from the standpoint of function, of staying free from pain, larger or stronger, more muscular glutes can protect your lower back, different joints. Also, stronger glutes are really going to help you with your lift. So whether you're an athlete and you want to sprint faster, be more explosive, have a better squat, strong glutes are going to really help with all of that.
Exactly. And coming from like a rehab physical therapy perspective, a lot of my lower back pain clients, they actually have weak glutes. Like they don't have that mind-muscle connection to their glutes. They don't even know how to turn on, activate it in a bridge or a squat. So it really takes a lot out of the whole program for me to kind of build that connection so they're able to be like, oh, that's what my glutes feel like. And then from then on, later on in their program, that's when I'm like, all right, now that you can feel your glutes, let's start building that strength and then build that muscle in your glutes as well to help protect your lower back.
That was me for like the first 3 years I deadlifted. I just felt it so much in my spinal erectors, muscles in my back. And I was wondering, why did they always feel so tight, and why was I getting lower back pain? And it wasn't until I really started to isolate my glutes with exercises like hip thrusts, hip bridges, and build that connection. That's when I finally started getting not only stronger on my deadlifts, but also not feeling that back pain anymore. But that's kind of for another podcast. Let's get into the first topic, our 3 favorite movements for building strong and muscular glutes. Brandon, why don't you take the first exercise?
Well, you already mentioned it, but it's the RDL. So the RDL,
the Romanian
deadlift, if you guys don't know what it is back home, it's very similar to the regular deadlift, except this time the weight's going to start up above to where your waist is, and you have a slight bend in the knee, and you're going to bring your butt back all the way until you feel a stretch in the hamstrings. And from there, ideally, you don't want to bring the weight all the way down because that kind of takes tension off the hamstrings and glutes. And then when you're right there in that motion, you're going to squeeze your butt cheeks and stand all the way up. You can do this single leg, you can do it staggered, however you want it, but it's just a great way to kind of build or target the glutes a little better.
Totally. And I think the conventional RDL, in my opinion, is probably the best for overall strength, overall muscular development. It's really cool and good to phase in, the single leg variations, the B stance variations.
Oh, yeah.
But I think those while they still do have like a muscular development benefit, those are either good to incorporate more down the line or, for a rehab perspective or athletic performance. But I really love the RDL myself, whether I do it with a dumbbell, whether I do it with a barbell. And like Brandon said, just keeping that upright torso. I like to think about, like there's a car door behind me. I'm trying to close with my butt.
There you go.
So I'm just pushing that butt back as I hinge forward, bars staying close to my shins. And right when I feel that stretch in my hamstrings is when I'm going to kind of drive my hips through and squeeze my glutes at the top. And for me, it's developed my glutes a lot.
Definitely. I can quote that one.
Now, the second glute movement is going to be back squats. Now, when we think of back squats, not everyone will think glutes immediately. And that's true for a reason that some people might be more quad dominant. So when some people perform a back squat, they might feel it more in their quads than their glutes. Other people might, right off the bat, feel it a lot in their glutes. But when properly performed with the intention of building glutes, you can really get a lot out of this movement.
Exactly. And that's why when you look at those people in the squat racks at the gym, they're the ones spending so much time under the barbell for doing back squats. You can tell that their glutes are actually pretty big,
Yeah, usually fairly developed.
Fairly developed, exactly. And that's because you have a very heavy weight right on your spine, and that kind of just tells your spine to fire to the muscles that it's going to recruit, which is the glutes as you're going up and down to that motion. So that's why the back squat is very superior in giving your glutes the better stimulus for growth.
Yeah. With the back squats, you can just utilize so much weight that you really get that maximal tension for the glutes. With the RDLs, you can still use a lot of weight, but I also really like with the RDLs that you get that stretch emphasis at the bottom for the hamstrings, and then you also on the glutes, but you get to really focus on the extension of the hips, which is something that, you know, depending how your leverages are in the squats, you can kind of maybe use more knee extension and get away with that a little bit. With the RDLs, it's that pure hip extension. So it's those two combos those are great for building the glutes.
And then and if you want to add something else to that combo, a third one, it would be
the trifecta.
Yeah, the trifecta.
Are we ready to tell them though?
I don't know, but they might know it. They might know it, but it is, you guessed it, the hip thrust.
The hip thrust.
So with the hip thrust, I actually do I wish we mentioned this in the beginning, because I actually like starting clients off with hip thrust, especially before they do squats or any kind of deadlift, because a lot of clients, they don't really have that connection to their glutes yet.
Very true.
They're either quad dominant with their squat or deadlift. So when you have them do a hip thrust, which is basically having your your shoulder blades on a bench or on a box, and you're going to go ahead and keep your feet on the ground, and you're going to go ahead and thrust up and down. You guys know this one already. And you're going to be squeezing your butt cheeks on the way up and coming down nice and slow, getting that tension. So that is a good isolation for the glutes alone, because you don't let the quads play into that motion. So your quads should be quiet during that whole motion. If your quads are on, because I do have some clients that do feel in their quads, then that means you might have to address more hip mobility issues and kind of wake up your glutes a little more. But I do like the hip thrust before any of the exercises like the back squats or RDLs.
And two things I'll say is if you're feeling it too much in your quads, or maybe more in your hamstrings, adjusting that foot position can help a lot. So when you're at the top of the hip thrust, you want a 90-degree angle between the femur and the shin. If your foot's a little too far out or too far in, it might take away some of that tension off the quads. And I love that you said that you like starting the workout with hip thrusts oftentimes. I think that's a great example of how, you know, it should be really individual with how we program things. Because I think the same thing, if you have a client who doesn't really feel it in their glutes, we need to isolate the glutes, really have those glutes fire and have them develop a mind-muscle connection, so when they go into their back squats or the RDLs, they can feel it. One thing I would say to kind of go in the other direction though is, if you have a client and you know like they already have a tremendous, you know, connection with their glutes, when they do a back squat, they feel it in their glutes so much, well then we probably could afford to start the workout with back squats and then kind of put the hip thrusts in as more of an end of the workout isolation. So, and one is not better than the other, but I would say in the case of if you're not feeling it in your glutes, definitely start with the hip thrust or an isolation like that.
Exactly. And if you don't even feel it with the hip thrust at all, I would have you hold that hip thrust position for about 10 to 15 seconds, even 30 seconds. I've had a client hold the hip thrust.
Well, that's priming, right? Why don't we go into priming?
Oh, it's priming, exactly. So next topic of how to get an ass like Kim K is talking about how to program glutes into your weekly workout or your monthly workout or whatever. And the first thing you're going to want to do is address the priming of the glutes. And by priming, we mean we want your glutes to be on even before you start your main exercise. So going back to our example, let's say back squats is your first main strength exercise and you have that poor connection, then we're going to fire up those glutes with hip thrust. But besides hip thrust, we could do something like lateral band walks, putting one of those TheraBands above the knee and you're walking laterally side to side. Another way is doing just regular bridges where you're laying on your back, knees bent, feet are on the ground. You're squeezing your butt cheeks to bring your hips off the ground.
Even some like laying on the side, some leg lifts.
Leg lifts, yeah, exactly. Like some side-lying leg lifts.
Even clamshells.
Clamshells also are a good one. Or even if you search up fire hydrants, that one's way too hard to explain. But search up fire hydrants on YouTube. But those are some really good exercises to help better engage your glutes. Because if you just go into doing back squats without doing that priming, you might feel it more in the quads, and we're kind of still reinforcing that movement pattern to where your brain's like, oh, squats are going to be quads for sure, instead of letting your brain gradually know, like, oh, the glutes are on a little bit after those lateral band walks, after those fire hydrants, after the clams. The brain's going to be all like, you know what, maybe we could let it stay on while we do the squats,
Exactly.
So that could be one way to go ahead and prime.
Yeah, and if your goal is building your quads with a squat and you already feel it in the quads, well, then maybe we don't need to do all that. But today's goal is about building your butt. So if you want to build your butt, you need to be able to connect with the glute muscles. Also, it's really important to not only build a good connection and doing that through priming, but also to make sure that you're phasing rep ranges. So a lot of people will find a rep range that they really like. For me, I tend to like those lower strength rep ranges where I'm sitting kind of between the 4 to 7 reps and I get to use a heavier weight and feel really strong. I definitely know some other people who like really sitting in that 12 to 20 rep range, getting that pump. And both are good, but we don't want to just stay in one. It's important to phase them, whether that's within one workout. An example of that could be you start with your hip thrust. You really want to build that mind-muscle connection. So your sets are 10 to 20 reps to get that pump. Then you go to your back squats. You already have that connection. Now you're doing a 5x5, something lower. It could be within the workout, or it could be week to week you're changing it. So you could do 1 week and you're just doing all low reps, all heavier weight. Then that next week you increase the reps, reduce the weight, still having that high intensity. And you can phase it week to week as well.
Exactly, and you do have to phase it week by week, as in you want to keep track of like how long you've been staying at the 12 plus rep range. How long have you been doing a 5x5? My rule is usually like around 4 to 5. I'll keep you in a phase. 3 is kind of like pushing it a little. But 4 to 5 is good to let your glutes know that adaptation of like, okay, we're gonna try to grow in this rep range.
Yeah, I'd say never less than 3, maybe as high as 8, but that would be pushing it. So I think it sounds like we both like that, like 4 to 6 week range.
Yeah, 4 to 6 week range for sure. And like what Gabe said, every rep range has its benefits. To where if you do that 5x5, you're building that strength, and then if you go for 8 to 12, you're building more of like kind of building the actual size of the glutes. So you just want to play around with it because one will complement the other.
Exactly. And the last point we have here, so far we've went over our 3 favorite glute movements. What were those one more time?
RDLs, back squats, hip thrust.
We went over how to program for your glutes, building that connection with them by using priming, putting the more connective exercises in the beginning of the workout, and properly phasing your workouts with rep ranges and your sets and everything. And the last point is making sure that you're eating in a caloric surplus. Now, I wouldn't say this is kind of like always you have to, because you can gain muscle at maintenance, and you can gain, significant muscle. But if you're not eating in a caloric surplus, meaning that you're eating a little more than your body needs to stay the same, and when you do that, your body then can take those surplus calories and divert them, to muscle growth. If you're finding that you're kind of just stagnating, well, then that would be my next course of action for you is, okay, eat in that caloric surplus, because your body might just need some more fuel to really reap the rewards. I've seen so many people where they're like, what's wrong with my programming? And I look at it and I'm like, nothing. Your workout is great. You're just not feeding your body enough fuel. So with that, I would say, making sure you're having enough protein. Kind of a general recommendation there would be like 0.75 grams per pound of body weight. And then also just calorie-wise, like if you find that your weight is stagnant and you're eating 2,000 calories a day, you should probably bump it up. I would recommend bumping it up like 250 calories to start. If you're still not moving that much, maybe another 500 calories. But if you're gaining around, like half a pound of body weight a week, give or take, maybe up to like a pound or so, it's kind of a good amount where you're not going to gain so fast you're putting on tons of fat. But you have that extra energy to divert towards muscle growth.
Exactly, and that's why it's really important to also keep an eye on your nutrition, because if you're doing all this training and you don't see any results, like what Gabe said, you got to dial into that nutrition and start eating more in a caloric surplus. And that's why commonly we see a lot of clients, our personal training clients, where it's usually like someone who's a little skinnier and they say like, oh, I want to build my glutes or whatnot, and then they say like, oh, I have to eat that much. Like they're surprised when you have to tell them like, oh, you have to eat this then, like in the consults. You have to tell them like when we're adjusting nutrition, oh, you have to eat this much then if you want to build your glutes. But then some people, they won't be really comfortable with it. So you really want to see what your comfort levels are and how far you want to actually build your glutes.
That's a good point. Because I actually recently I had 2 identical clients, and they were both males, so they weren't, specifically focused on the glutes, but developing a muscle is kind of the same no matter what. So this, what I'm about to say still applies. They were pretty similar on, a muscle size, range, similar weight, similar height. And one of them was kind of willing to do whatever it takes. He's like, I'll eat as much as I need to. I'll be consistent with the nutrition.
Nice.
And the other told me like, I'll try to eat some more protein, but I don't want to track my nutrition. And what I just told the second guy was, I said, okay, you can still make solid progress and you'll probably feel good about it, but you will be leaving some progress on the table by not, fully tracking that nutrition. And I kind of saw the side by side, they both gained significant amounts of muscle, but the one who was consistently tracking the nutrition, eating in that caloric surplus, skyrocketed past the other person as far as the progress went.
Yep, that's another thing why nutrition is so important. So we just talked about how to get an ass like Kim K, how to build your glutes. We talked about our 3 favorite glute movements. Then we taught you how to program some glutes. You might want to rewind that one. And then, of course, the last tip was eat in a caloric surplus.
And a bonus tip, make sure you're sleeping enough, but we can talk about that more in another episode.
Oh, we will. Stay tuned. But that's it for now. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Gabe.
This is Fit Facts. Thanks.
Thank you.